Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we are back here at the Dripstone Cave, where we are going to make a farm that's probably going to encourage me to stick around here for a little while and do some terraforming. Much as this cave looks kind of amazing the way it is, I kind of want to terraform some of the upper layers around here. And in the meantime, I want there to be something running in the background that is going to fuel our future endeavors. Because if we hop down to the beacon mining level, where I've been doing a bunch of carving out of the stone layers in a previous episode where we were discussing haste beacons and their benefits and whether they were still really worth it to mine with, down here in this vast open stone space that we have created, I encountered a couple of slimes. And it's probably going to be a fairly natural thing that happens while you are carving out a space this large. If you decide to do some beacon strip mining like this, you're going to encounter a couple of areas in which slimes spawn in the lower levels of caves. You may even have encountered a couple just in your standard caving sessions. But those are slime chunks. Basically, slimes spawn in two places in the Minecraft world. They spawn in swamps on the surface at night, preferably when the moon is at a fuller phase, or they spawn below the Y coordinate of 40, so from 40 on downwards, in cave layers. And both of these have kind of different ways that they spawn, different rules that govern exactly how they spawn. And slimes that spawn in cave layers can spawn in any light level, unlike a lot of other hostile mobs in the area, which means that we can actually still see some slimes spawning even though we have lit up the majority of this cave area to the point where nothing hostile is spawning at all. And there's one right now. A couple of them have just spawned right across the room, and this is a perfect opportunity to test my theory over here. I need to hop in here, press F3 and G, and take the coordinates of this chunk, because this is pretty much guaranteed to be a slime chunk. If I've just seen two massive slimes spawn over here, then that is a sure sign that we are onto a winner over here. And after a few short swipes of the sword, we have an absolute ton of slimes hopping towards me, which I'm just going to loot for slime, because right now slime is a pretty valuable resource. We need it for sticky pistons and slime blocks. We can also craft a bunch of the excess slime into magma cream if we don't want to spend a bunch of time farming magma cubes for it in the nether. Combine it with blaze powder to make magma cream and you'll have a lifetime supply of fire resistance potions, provided that you aren't relying on getting those from piglins already. I already had photographic evidence that some slimes were spawning in a chunk over here, actually. I ended up taking a couple of screenshots while I was digging this whole place out, but the fact that we just spotted those two slimes spawning over here was really the icing on the cake. And once we find an area where those slimes are going to spawn, it is more or less guaranteed that slimes will continue to spawn in the same chunk we saw those slimes spawn. So if I enable chunk borders like this, you can see the defined boundary of this area. You can also check this out in the F3 debug information here. If you look at the chunk coordinates below our regular block coordinates, you will see that we are currently in chunk -61, 0, 75, and that's the overall chunks of the world measured from the area around 0, 0. And we can potentially test a couple more areas in this cave to expand our slime farm to include any neighboring chunks that might also spawn slimes. Oh, it's thundering outside as well. Unfortunately for me, this slime chunk is slightly outside of the radius where I have set up my beacons, so if I want the haste effect to get rid of some of this stone, I am going to have to do a little bit of running back and forth to make sure that I can grab the haste effect and insta-mine out the rest of this stone. But in a way, that's okay, because as we've discussed in previous farm videos, the one about the mob farm and the enderman farm, for example, a slime farm is going to be more efficient the further down in the world we build it. So, in theory, the best approach to this area is going to be digging it out all the way down to bedrock, and returning to the scene later with a few empty shulker boxes and a whole bunch of moss and some bone blocks so that we can convert those into bone meal. We're going to dig this entire thing down the same way we did the mountain chunk, using moss mining to dig out those deep slate layers more or less instantly. Now, it's worth noting that the efficiency of the farm is going to be at its best when you can dig everything above this area out to the open sky, so that the topmost blocks of the farm are really the topmost blocks in the chunk, and that's what's going to increase the amount of spawns in your slime farm to ridiculous levels. That's the kind of thing that's going to make it as efficient as something like the Enderman farm that we built in the end. We would also need to spawn-proof a vast majority of the spawnable space around here, lighting everything up to make sure no hostile mobs could spawn elsewhere, and that would allow for only slimes to spawn in this chunk, if we wanted to make this the most optimal slime spawning farm possible. But frankly, I don't think all of that is going to be necessary. We're only in a single-player world here. We're going to use a decent amount of slime, but the amount of rates we're going to get out of this farm, regardless of optimization, is going to be enough to get us by for the foreseeable future. So really, it's all about just creating as much valid spawning area inside of a slime chunk as possible. And right now, these are all solid layers of stone that we can convert into layer after layer of platforms that are going to spawn the slimes for us in the first place. Now with the chunk borders on, I'm actually going to dig out one more block around the outside of the area I want to build the slime farm, because I actually think it'd look really cool with a giant mossy border going all the way down to bedrock, and basically we can turn the entire slime farm into a big green space. I think it'd look kind of aesthetically pleasing that way, and with the amount of moss that we'll have on hand, we can probably give that a go. So I'm going to temporarily move my shulker boxes outside of this space. We'll probably just pop them down over here in the neighboring chunk. We'll break down this bone meal and we'll get to work. Now, I was able to find this slime chunk pretty organically. We spotted some slimes spawning, and that was all the evidence we needed that slimes were going to continuously spawn in this chunk. However, it may be a little bit more difficult doing this in practice in your own Minecraft world, because of course this whole concept relies pretty heavily on luck of being in the right place at the right time, and that's not always going to be the case with these slime chunks. So if you want to find a slime chunk nice and easily to attempt one of these farms yourself, it is honestly worthwhile looking them up externally to your Minecraft world by looking them up using tools like amidst or chunk base to locate slime chunks within your world. You can find those pretty easily, and even on a multiplayer server, as long as you know the seed of the world, as long as the people who admin the server have been happy to give that to you, you should be able to look up the areas slimes are going to spawn that way. An alternative to that, and the reason I brought all of these fences with me, is that if you spot some slimes spawning but you're not entirely confident that the slimes were in that chunk when they spawn, maybe they've crossed over a chunk border and you're not certain if they spawned in this chunk or the neighboring chunk, well, that's when you can break out the fences, because of course slimes aren't going to be able to hop over the side of fences, especially with the roof being this low. And so what you can do is locate the chunk that you were in, and in the case of my screenshot that I had, I was in a chunk that started around negative 1002, so we're back over this way, and 1192, so around here. And if I do F3 and G once again, we can take a look at the chunk borders. We're pretty squarely in the center of this chunk. This is where I screenshotted the slime before. And so what we're going to do is mark the outer boundary of this chunk with fences, because slimes aren't going to be able to hop over those, and you're going to be able to tell if slimes spawn in this area that they have spawned within this chunk specifically. And frankly, now that I look at it, that is not too far away from the slime chunk that we're currently converting into an area for this farm. So who knows, we might end up with two slime chunks operating in tandem within this area. Either way, we've got the composter all set up now. We'll be able to dig out all of the moss from this chunk and process it as bone meal. We might save a little bit of it for decoration, but removing the torches from this area is going to be a necessity to make sure that we can dig the whole thing out and it's all going to convert to moss. So it's time to go and grab my hoe and do a whole lot of digging. Hey folks, welcome back. So we are now looking at a pretty decent sized hole in the ground, and the spiral staircase around the outside takes advantage of that extra block we gave ourselves in every direction, but the center of that spiral is one perfect chunk. And I did end up going and checking just in case this didn't turn out to be a slime chunk and I'd severely miscalculated or just imagined the fact that the slimes spawned right in front of my eyes earlier, but I did check this on Chunk Base and this is definitely a slime chunk. I also found out that one of the neighboring chunks here is also a slime chunk, so if we wanted to, we could do this at double the size, but I think just one chunk is going to be enough for what we have in mind. Certainly enough for a single player world, although you might want to consider something larger if you're supplying slime to the entirety of an active multiplayer server. So the next couple of stages of this farm are going to require us to build up a bunch of platforms, basically 2.5 to 3 blocks high, enough room for one of the largest types of slime to spawn, and usually I give that, 2.5, 3 blocks. You can build that out of slabs or solid blocks when you do each platform. It is still thundering outside. That scared the life out of me. So the slimes are going to track towards something that they target as an enemy, and that's going to be a series of iron golems embedded in the walls around here. But before the slimes can reach the iron golems, they are going to end up going through nether portals into the nether, where there's going to be an easy kill area set up, which is going to be loaded basically every time a slime goes through the portal, and they should all end up going to the same place, even if we end up building floor-to-ceiling portals in here, because with a bit of careful calculation, we can make sure all of the portals in this chunk go to the same place. So once we have slept the storm away, we're going to grab a bunch of iron. I knew I had a ton of iron around here somewhere. We're going to bring that downstairs, and we're going to use that to make a whole bunch of iron golems. We're also going to need to grab some carved pumpkins, because I don't think we've actually made an iron golem in this series before. Probably best to just spam all of these in a row. We're going to get so many pumpkin seeds out of this as well, but I think we'll start with 32, and I don't think we should need too many of them, so 32 might actually be enough. And before we start figuring out where our iron golems are going to go, we're actually going to cover this bottom layer up with some sort of solid block or slab, because bedrock is not actually a spawnable block, and so by using this bottommost layer, even though the spawns here might be slightly more efficient than they are the layer above, we're actually going to lose a lot of spawning spaces just by keeping all of this bedrock here. So best to cover that over with some sort of spawnable block. In this case, because the entire farm is going to be made out of this stuff, I'm going to be using moss. Once this whole area is completely covered in moss, we can light it up however we want to, and I feel like probably one torch in the center of all of this is still going to spawn-proof it to the very corners back here. I do have a couple of torches up on the walls, so they may be affecting things somewhat, but we can light it up using very minimal resources, and even though the light from torches typically blocks other types of mob spawns, it doesn't actually count as a hitbox that will interfere with slime spawning, so mobs can actually spawn in the area of a torch if they are not going to be restricted by the light level. So a lot of the time, people just want to evenly light a platform. They just put a bunch of torches in a rough square like this, and that's usually good enough. So as you can see right here, the chunk borders line up perfectly with the walls of this and right in front of where this staircase is. Around the outside, probably about here, I want to say, is where we're going to be putting our iron golems. I'm going to reclaim some of the fences from the section that I bordered off here, which, as we saw in the time-lapse, was spawning slimes, but we don't need to worry too much about that for now. So we're going to leave one space between the moss and the fence, because that is where the nether portal is going to go, and behind the fence is where we're going to build our iron golem. We also want to make sure there's another block of space around it, because sometimes when an iron golem spawns in after building it, it can suffocate in the wall behind. So you want to make sure there's a little bit of space around it. You make a T shape out of iron blocks, just throw a pumpkin on top, make sure it is carved, and you'll get yourself an iron golem, which is, like I said, the first time I've done that in this season of Survival Guide. We are going to put a torch in here with the iron golem just to make sure that nothing spawns in the dark area here, because otherwise the golem will take damage and eventually die from any other hostile spawns that happen in this area. But the idea is that the slimes won't even reach the iron golem because they'll go through a nether portal right here, and that's going to prevent them from making contact with the iron golem. They're just going to go straight through to the nether. So naturally we will want to dig out a larger area for these slimes to bounce their way into, and I'm thinking we're probably going to make the nether portals a little bit wider than this. This is 7 wide right now. I'm thinking probably 11 wide. We'll take off the 2 corners here. We might occasionally get some slimes spawning around here in the corners, but then their natural pathfinding is going to take them towards the center of the farm, where they'll notice the iron golem, start bouncing towards it, and head through the nether portal. In order to speed up this farm a little bit, we're going to make iron golems on multiple sides of the farm, because wherever the slimes spawn, they will instantly target the nearest golem, and that shortens the time between them spawning here and them going through to the nether. And the fact that they've gone through a nether portal will actually remove them from the overall mob cap here in the overworld. They should die pretty quickly in the nether anyway with the setup that I have in mind, but either way it's going to make sure that more slimes can spawn as soon as the other slimes have gone through the nether portal. So this is actually going to run pretty efficiently once we're done here. And it's just occurred to me that I built this one side on odd numbers, even though the walls of a 16 by 16 area are going to be on even numbers. So we're going to widen out the golem enclosures to be 4 blocks wide and probably widen out the nether portals accordingly. If you want to do this with fewer golems, you might consider bringing this back wall in 1 more block once the golems are built, so that they are just standing in a 1 block wide space, give or take the hitbox of the fence there. But for the most part, we don't need to worry too much about that. We've got the iron to burn. You might also be able to play around with the positioning of the iron golems a little bit, so that 1 iron golem will attract the slimes from 2 platforms, but once again, you've got to get them through the nether portals as well, so bear that in mind. Speaking of the nether portals, though, this is where the build is going to get a little bit more expensive. We're going to return to our storage system and grab as much obsidian as we have on us. We may need to take an additional trip to the end to farm a bit more from the obsidian pillars around the dragon fight arena, but I think we're going to come away with a decent amount of obsidian. We could also get it from our piglin bartering farm, and we need to start building the nether portals in here just in case any slimes end up spawning. So with a couple of handfuls of obsidian, we're going to build out the portal frames around the outside of these golems, and any slimes that wander into this place are going to be sucked on through to the nether. The cool part is the bottom half of the portal above can be the top half of this portal, meaning that we can just stack them all the way up the walls down here, and it should be nice and easy for the slimes to enter each of those portals. That may affect the spacing of our platforms a little bit, but nether portals are a minimum of 3 blocks high. And I've skipped the bottom corners, but I've put in the top corners. We're probably going to have to take those blocks back if we want to save a bit of obsidian, because that has been 2 stacks of obsidian. That's a lot of obsidian. We need to go and grab a lot more of that if we want to make this farm properly. But at this point, we can start building our next spawning platform. The nether portal above is going to go directly above that, which will save us a little bit of obsidian too. And we need to start thinking about where exactly these portals are going to go. Because right now, theoretically, the nearest portal they have to link to in the nether is the one that leads to the big geode in my dripstone cave base. And that's not where we want these slimes to end up. Yep, it looks like that does link to our geode base portal, and in theory, this is going to lead back to the portal on top of the bridge, so we can use this to get up there. But luckily for us, since we're going to be building all of these platforms below deep slate level, so kind of around Y0 and below is probably going to be the tallest point the platforms will reach, we can create a nether portal lower down in the nether, which is probably going to connect much easier to all of these portals, and that will leave us a bit of leeway to create another portal that we can go to so that we can access the output of the farm, so that we can pick up all of the slime balls this thing is going to produce without having to worry about stepping through and into the trap ourselves. And if anybody's wondering how I can bear to mine this much obsidian, I actually have a little trick for gathering it here in the end. I climb up to the tallest obsidian pillar, usually just fly up here with elytra, find an area where there are 2 blocks, and I've been mining a little bit of this out already. I've got like 3 stacks and change in my inventory already. What you want to do is stand in between 2 blocks here so that we can just mine one, and if we're looking at the right angle, we end up mining the one next door as well, right? So you're kind of stood halfway back on these blocks, looking halfway towards them at a slight angle. So you mine the first block, and then you're looking at the side face of this block, and you continue mining that. Once you've got that angle down and you know that you're in the right place, hit F3 and T at the same time, and then take your hands off the mouse. That will actually reload the textures, but it also locks the left-click action in place. And so right now, I've got my hands off the mouse, I'm freely gesturing in the air, and the pickaxe continues to mine for me. I do this until I've got the entire thing down to about the ground level, which is about Y64, so we're probably going to shave off, like, you know, about a stack or so, probably a little bit extra. If I want to stop mining at any point, it's as simple as left-clicking, and that's all you need to do. It stops you mining, you resume control of the player as normal, and if you want to start again, you just need to hold down the left mouse button, keep it held while you press F3 and T, and once the resource packs have reloaded, you'll be automatically mining your way down the tower. So having taken the coordinates of the 4 portals we've made at the bottom of the slime farm, I want to make sure that we can create a set of portals here in the nether that are going to deposit our slimes pretty far down. And to make sure that it's not going to entangle with this portal, we're going to build it as low down in the world as possible. It's not possible to build anything below 0 in the nether, so we're just going to head down to a level just above bedrock, which may involve getting through some lava, but we'll deal with that as we come to it. And quite incredibly, we've been able to dig straight down, and we've just encountered bedrock. Now, we want to give ourselves a little bit of headroom so that we can place the killing mechanism inside of here, which is going to be a bunch of soul campfires. We need to make sure our portal is still a couple of blocks wider than this. And so with 150 and 151 as roughly our center there, we're going to try building a decent-sized portal frame for all of these slimes to fall on through. And naturally, we'll need to open it out on both sides here, because the slimes will be coming through these portals basically at all angles, so we don't want them to get stuck in a block or anything like that. We want to make sure that they can hop straight out of this. Yeah, we might actually need to move this portal up a block or two, because ideally we want to have a pad of hoppers here that the slimes can jump out onto, and they've got to be campfires on top of that. We don't want them jumping back into the portal right afterwards. Of course, before we go any further, it's probably a good idea to check that this portal actually links to the portals that we've made at our slime farm in the overworld, so let's hop on through and find out. Yep, there we go. We are right at the bottom of the pit in front of an iron golem, and hopefully each one of these portals should now link back to that spot, but it's worth testing this just in case. Yep, there we go. That is 1 of 4, and I'm going to assume that the other ones will all be okay. So down here at more or less the lowest point we can place them, we're going to set up the pad of hoppers that's going to lead out to the output chest for the slime farm. And we might want to have these a little bit higher up, just on account of how much slime will hopefully accumulate in here. So we're going to build those at this sort of level, and it'll come around the corner from a pad of hoppers like this. On top of these, we're going to put the soul campfires, and this should give enough room for the slimes to jump out, die pretty quickly on the soul campfires. The little ones will die more or less instantly once they take a point of damage, and that will collect up all of the slime balls into these hoppers to be collected in our storage chest. Naturally, we want to close off the side here to make sure that nothing is going to get out of that area, and we'll do the same pad of hoppers on this side as well. And from that point forth, it's going to be all about building up the platforms for the slimes to spawn on, and building up the portals and golems that are going to direct them through into the nether. We also need to set up a nice, easy way of getting down to our slime collection area, which is relatively straightforward, if a little bit too close for comfort to this lava lake. And as long as we can guarantee that there's no slime coming through it, we could also set up another portal that's slightly lower to the ground here, so we don't have to come back up to our main portal every time. Well, enough waffling, it's time to get the rest of the portals and the moss platforms in place so that we can finally have a functional slime farm. Well, my friends, I am delighted to announce that I have once again bitten off a great deal more than I can chew with this project, because, I mean, look at the caves around us right now. I've already spent about 2 hours lighting up caves in this area so that we can hopefully increase the chances of mob spawns inside our slime farm, because it's, frankly, a very different landscape down here now. It used to be in previous Minecraft updates that you could build something like this, and depending on where you built it, you could get pretty decent spawn rates within a reasonable amount of time, light up a few caves in the vicinity, and you'd at least get some decent spawns. If you were a little bit more selective about the location where you built something like this, for example, under an ocean so that you didn't get surface spawns during the day, or near a mushroom island so that you didn't end up with a great deal of stuff spawning in the hostile mob camp at all, it was a lot easier to get a farm like this built. And honestly, I do think that if I was spending a bit more time around something like a mushroom island, it would be a lot better to build a slime farm there. But the difference is, I've chosen this location because I know I'm going to be around this base more often, or rather, I want to be around this base more often, and I'm using the fact that the slime farm is here as a means to convince myself to keep spending time at this base, so that I feel like I can get more of it complete before we move on to doing something completely different. And the flip side of that is that I have to light up an absurd amount of terrain down here so that we can guarantee that slimes are even going to spawn in that farm at all, because the hostile mob cap is so easily taken up with the oodles of space that we have down here in these caves. And this right here is one of the areas closer to the farm that I need to still light up, having lit up a great deal of stuff on a live stream, and still finding little nooks and crannies and caves that lead into vast, dark, open spaces that I will ideally need to eliminate. But I think optimization was never truly the goal of this farm. The goal was to see if we could build something like this in the vicinity of the base, and we have done it, and I am delighted to let you folks know that we actually have a functional slime farm over there. We also have a whole bundle of zombie spawners in the neighborhood, and it turns out that I have encountered 3 or 4 of these as I've been roaming around the caves around here, clearing up some of the darker spots. I keep hearing zombie noises or spider noises through a wall, and I look down, and would you look at that? We have another enchanted golden apple. Absolutely incredible. Did not expect to find one of those, but very happy we have that because we used our last one on a banner pattern a little while ago, and so it's nice to have one of these for the balanced diet advancement, which is around here somewhere. I think that's in... Is that in husbandry? Yeah, we need to eat another, what, like 24 things, and one of those is the enchanted golden apple. But it's honestly quite rewarding to know that the more torches we place around this area, the closer our farm gets to becoming very, very efficient. One thing that's been really useful throughout the process of lighting up these caves is having had a beacon over there by where the slime farm is set up, more or less, because we know that if we're in the effect of the beacon's radius, if haste pops up, and we could probably sub that out for swiftness or regen or something that would actually help us out down here in the caves, that at least gives us an indication that we are relatively close to the spot where the slime farm is, and therefore any dark spots we see around here should probably be lit up. Now I'm actually going to bring in my camera account to show you a little bit more of the structure of the farm, because I've had to cap it off at 8 layers worth of portals and iron golems. It kind of seemed like the right sort of approach to take, and we could always expand the farm if we need to. Slimes will spawn, as I said, anywhere between bedrock and Y40 in the world, so we could have layer upon layer all throughout this chunk if we wanted to, but I'm wondering if there's maybe diminishing returns to be had from the amount of layers that we've got here. I guess we will find out in the fullness of time. But this right here is where I'm standing next to the chunk that contains the slime farm, and as we come on down through the floors of the slime farm, we may occasionally see some slimes spawning. Now, I am maybe going to conduct a couple of experiments about whether or not the torches are preventing slimes from spawning after all, because it does seem like maybe we could free up some spawning spaces here when we were blocking some slime spawns if we could put the lights in the floor. If there were, you know, jack-o'-lanterns or something like that in here, or sea lanterns, then that might actually allow us to spawn more slimes in here. But from what I can see, the slimes that we have had spawn have spawned around the edges of the farm and have almost immediately gone into the Nether Portals here. So it's kind of difficult to tell one way or the other whether or not the slimes are going to spawn. And that's about the bottom of the farm right there, where it reaches towards the bedrock and into the void. But if we take a little look at this farm from the outside, and yes, we are seeing through the scenery a little bit here, but try and ignore that if you can, we are looking at a couple of interesting features of this farm that I had not previously foreseen, but I probably should have. And one of them is currently getting attacked by the iron golems. So zombie pigmen will spawn from a portal every so often, and when you have this many portals in this kind of farm, then they tend to occur more often than not. Now, they haven't actually damaged any of the iron golems, even though the golems will attack them when they see them because they perceive the piglins as potentially hostile mobs. Luckily, the piglins can't reach the golems over the fences, and the golems have a much higher reach, which makes them able to deal with the piglins before they really become a problem, and they will two-shot any zombie piglin that spawns in the farm anyway. So what that's actually doing is sending a couple of these zombie piglin drops back through the Nether Portals, and sometimes they even end up in the collection mechanism for the farm. But as you can see right now, it doesn't exactly look like Slimerama inside of here. The slimes aren't really making themselves known in such large quantities, and part of that may be the fact that they are more or less instantly transported through the Nether Portals if they spawn in that vicinity. If their hitbox interacts with the portal, they are gone straight into the Nether. But really, one of the main things that's to blame is the amount of dark space that still exists out here. And yeah, as you can see right over here, there are a bunch of skeletons and zombies still walking around that we'll probably have to deal with. The zombie piglins that spawn inside these portals, even if they are dealt with by the iron golems, will sometimes take up a little bit of the hostile mob cap, so that's something to be aware of as well. And of course, where I am up here at the top of the farm, we're at Y8, and the farm extends down to Y-64, which means that we're about 70 or so blocks away from the lowest point in the farm. I mean, it's technically around Y60 because that's where the bedrock starts, but even so, we have about 64 blocks between us and the bottom of the farm, and that means that potentially the slimes on the lower platforms have a chance to despawn before they make it into the portals. Oh, there is one right now. We very briefly saw a slime. I think we just about caught that one on camera before it disappeared into the portal, and that's the kind of spawns we're expecting to see here. The slimes are only present in the farm for a very short period of time, which means that they instantly free up the mob cap for more mobs to spawn. Unfortunately, right now that is still happening in a lot of the dark areas around here, but once we get a few more of those lit up, this farm could be very, very productive, even though we've built it underground without sky access in a place that is ultimately a very cavernous area. And there we go, we have one more slime to take a quick look at. As you can see, the golem doesn't even get to lay a hand on it. It just rolls on through the portal and gets sucked up into the collection mechanism. And on that subject, I think we should take our camera account over to the Nether and we can observe the way this farm looks on the opposite side. So here is our farm on the opposite side, and we do have a couple of zombie piglin drops, including some XP actually despawning in the center of the farm right now. But every so often a slime should come through this portal. It'll bounce outwards into the soul campfires. When that happens, it'll split up into all the little slimes. The little slimes will get killed by the campfires pretty much instantly. They'll all drop slime balls and those get pulled down into the system. We do have a little one in here now, and it's just gonna hop out the side of the Nether portal, and there it goes. Now, having logged out with my camera account, I can come down here to the collection area for our slime farm, and we'll take a look at the takings so far, because despite the fact that this is just a trickle of slime coming through here right now, we've still managed to get a couple of stacks of slime balls. Well, almost 2 stacks, and a few extra zombie piglin drops. So what I think we might end up doing is expanding this to include a quick item filter. If we can manage to squeeze it into this space, that will allow us to filter out just the slime balls, and honestly we could just trash the rest of this stuff. You know, a little bit of extra gold, not too bad, but I like the fact that we've got ourselves 2 stacks of slime balls in here. So while this has been a bit of a trial by fire in terms of a 118 slime farm, I'm pretty happy with the fact that it can at least get built around here near our dripstone cave, and if we end up lighting up some more of the darker areas like this, we are hopefully going to find that the slime flows a little bit more freely after that point. But folks, I have a bunch more lighting up to do, so that is where I'm going to call it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you enjoyed this look at slime farming, and hopefully you feel encouraged to build a slime farm in your own worlds. That trickle of slime will become a fountain in future, so don't you worry. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care, bye for now.